I'm going to motivate him, remind him what he was working for, ordered some business cards and put co-owner on there.
Oh
And I
boy.
gave them to him and I said, this is what you're working towards. Remember that. Until February 14th, I got served saying that he was the rightful owner. I kicked him out and he was entitled to an X amount of dollars. And that ended up being the start of it. I wanted to kind of show my ego got into place and the ego started really taking over.
So welcome to Escape the CEO Doom Loop, where we talk with world leaders about breaking the patterns to keep their companies and their teams stuck. I'm John Ninkovich, joined by my co-host Glen Dall.
Thanks, John. Great to see you again. Today, I'm really pleased to have one of my clients here with me, Casey Profita. He is the CEO of Gopher Mods, and Casey and I have been working together now in his leadership team since April of this year. So not that long, and Casey and his team are making great strides. Working together, it's been a real pleasurable experience seeing them learn and grow. But he's here today to share some of his experiences with us about starting Gopher Mods from the dorm room of the University of Minnesota.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Glad to have you. It's Golden Gopher.
Well, I know our football and sports teams aren't doing so hot, but they just need some metronomics coaching or vision or something, and they're going to be on the right path too.
There you go. It's all coaching, for sure.
That's right.
So, Casey, can you give us an overview of kind of Gopher Mods? What is Gopher Mods? How did Gopher Mods come to be? I know Glenn was doing a little kind of foreshadowing, started it out of your dorm room. Kind of bring us to, where it started and how you got to where you're at today and what that looks like.
Yeah, so it's been 15 plus years already. Started it at the University of Minnesota, where we're the Golden Gophers. At the time, the name was just more of a beer money and fun, pay for tuition maybe. So never thought 15, 16 years later, I'd be sitting here on a podcast talking about our history. Over that 15 years, we've had a lot of evolutions as a business, but today, here November 4th, 2025, our primary focus is making technology easy for schools and small business. We specialize in mobile technology, so iPhones, iPads, MacBooks. So if they need service, support, recycling, repair, consulting, chances are, we'll be able to help you with that. And over these 15 years, it's been an evolution of, starting off in the dorm room to retail stores to COVID to where we are today and our new journey today.
Wow, that's awesome. So kind of what has been that growth look like for you over 15 years? So you started, it sounds like, as an individual or maybe with a couple other, people in your dorm room doing some stuff. And, what's the scale of the business look like today versus 15 years ago in your dorm room?
Yeah, 15 years ago, I was just the dorm room. It was nothing more than, me going to and from school. And until one day I walked past an office that said, 100 square feet available. My roommates at that time were getting annoyed that at that point, we're out of the dorm and we're in our house we were just talking about this at a wedding this past week, and all my roommates joking at 1315th, 13th Avenue, Southeast in Como. I took the basement because it was the biggest. I could have my little factory down there of refurbishing and repairing game consoles at the time. And I remember walking past the University Tech Center. It said 100 square feet. And that was our first lease, January 1st, 2010. And that was when I actually have to become an LLC, get insurance. That was day one, essentially, of Gopher Mods. We focused primarily on service and support of video game consoles, and that's where the name kind of came from. We were modifying and adding value to game consoles. And then luckily one day we had a customer that said, hey, we love the work you did on this. I broke my iPhone. Can you fix it? And one of our core values is be curious. I think way back then we were always curious. And I was like, sure. And just happened to be at that same day, I was walking to and from my class with a friend from Chinese, and he goes, I work at Apple. I could fix that. I was like, really? You could fix? All right, I'll find the parts. You fix it. And then shortly after that, we had a line out the door of people wanting their iPhone fixed because we were the only shop outside of Apple in the Twin Cities that were servicing iPhones.
Wow.
That just kind of started snowballing and evolving from iPhones, iPads, MacBooks to anything with a smartphone, or anything with a button on it, we would service and support.
Wow, that's awesome. So today is your focus. You had mentioned earlier, I think, schools and small business. What does that look like for you? You think about kind of the scale of who you support today.
Yeah, today, and this is probably part of that doom loop of it took us a long time to get to this realization that our focus should be schools and small
Mm,
business. Once we recognize, it's a lot easier to work with one client with 50,000 devices versus 50,000 clients with 1 to 2 devices.
mm,
And so today we work with a couple hundred school districts and small businesses all across the country, fixing around, I think this year, about 60,000 devices. We'll
wow.
service and repair this year for just repairs. In addition to that, we do professional services, setting up devices, recycling devices, buying devices, selling devices. So I don't have our total widget count of probably
Yeah.
every single one of those. That's something we're working on, but the repairs are near and dear to me since that is something that we have been doing since day one.
Yeah.
We're in that scope of, doing a lot of repairs every single day for iPhones, iPads, MacBooks, Chromebooks, you name it, anything that technology-wise is in a classroom we're supporting.
Wow, that's cool. Are you doing like software support? Is it mostly hardware support, or what's kind of the delineation line
Primarily
for you?
today, yeah, it's mostly hardware break fix. The
Okay.
remedial software support is where we're looking to go next.
Okay. Cool. So you'd mentioned, and we'll get to the doom loop question in a minute, but I can't go past this. You'd mentioned that kind of epiphany that I'd rather have one client that's got 50,000 devices versus 50,000 clients that have one device. When did you have that epiphany? Was that before working with Glen, or was that been since?
That was before, and
Okay.
I think moreover, once we started working with Glen and it's starting to escape the doom loop, where it was like that was the path that we should singularly focus on. And that took a long time to get there. It was a painful way of recognizing like that's where we should focus. And, as much as we love the retail, I still do. But even though it shouldn't have been our focus because it's not going to help us reach our vision and our goals.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. I love that Casey brings that up because this came out in one of our early strategy sessions. And, when I first met Casey, their business was primarily retail. And this was at the start of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
which of course kind of forced them to shut down, I think, a few locations. But the idea of what to say no to and to
Yeah.
focus
Yeah.
has been, even just in the brief period we've been working together, like 6-7 months, it's just been interesting to see that evolution. And I know one of the things, Casey, that we've done in our strategy sessions is that was to accelerate the shutdown of the retail locations.
That is correct. We just closed our last retail store on September 30th. So 35 days ago, retail saga or chapter in our book is closed and it's on to the next one.
Yeah. It's interesting. It kind of takes me back to, I had a mentor when I got in the coaching business, and he said there's kind of like 3 great sales lies. All customers are of equal value. All revenue is the same, and all
Yeah.
gross margin is the same. I think I agree with him 100%. Customers aren't all the same value, and all revenue is not the same revenue. And I think that goes to exactly what you're talking about when you look at, I'd rather have one client with 50,000 devices versus how do I support 50,000 clients with that one device. It's really making those hard decisions around who are we really serving as a client and what do we have to put in place to win consistently with those is a big part of the strategy work that, businesses have to figure out, small to big, right? I mean, this is Fortune 100 stuff has the same issues. So those are all difficult decisions to make, but important to continue to grow and scale a business. So it's interesting that you say that. All right, so let me get to our question around the doom loop. So, this whole podcast came about because Glen and I and a couple of coaches a couple of years ago did this whole research project, interviewing with 72 CEOs across the globe, and just really trying to understand where was the CEO mindset at? What were the things they thinking about? What were the worries that they had? What were the things that were going well, what wasn't, right? And not looking for anything specifically, but what came out of the data for a vast majority of the CEOs, if not all, was this concept that we actually started to name the doom loop. And it was really this thing that it's really hard to be a CEO or business owner. And there's a lot of emotional, almost oil that you go through on the ups and downs of running a business, right? It could be, you lose a key customer, you don't have enough cash to fund payroll, you lose a key employee, like, all the things that we've all dealt with running companies, like that is hard and you're getting kicked in the teeth a lot. And so we weren't thinking that at all when we started this. We just were finding a way to connect and communicate with CEOs and ask some questions, and that came out of it. And so this podcast is really a derivative of that. So the question for you is, and this is the first question we ask everybody is, have you seen the CEO doom loop? How's it affected you? Do you know it's going to affect you? Or what are some things that you do to kind of manage through that whole process?
Well, pretty much everything you said there, I've gone through in my doom loop. So it's probably a lot
Check.
of little mini doom loops into a gigantic doom loop that might
Yeah.
finally be coming to an end. But I remember the doom loop started February 14th, Valentine's Day. That's how sad, or maybe I can remember like the origin of that is like, that was probably that start of it. And that was when I got served by my former best friend and kind of quasi business partner that he was a rightful owner of Gopher Mods. And I think if we back up, like that's when, I was doing some reflection. It's like, that's when I think my first major doom loop started. Valentine's Day of 12, 13 years ago. And that kind of all started by kind of like the most expensive business card I've ever bought in my life at the end of the day. It was, I didn't know how to motivate employees. I didn't know how to motivate anybody. I think I actually, reflection had a good who, not how. This was my first major who hire, and it just happened to be one of my good friends. And he was the sales guy. And I was like, yeah, I need a salesperson. I hate sales, not my core competency. And so it happened to also be my best friend. And
Mistake number one.
yeah, mistake number one. So here we go, jumping right in. And I didn't know how to motivate him. We made an agreement for him to become a co-owner. And after a couple months, I think it faded. So I should have, had some better success metrics, some accountability in place. And I was like, I'm going to motivate him, remind him what he was working for. So I ordered some business cards and put co-owner on there. And I gave them to him and I said, this is what you're working towards. Remember that. It worked for about a week. And then a week later, I'm like, all right, this clearly isn't working. Having a tough, conversation. Let's have the brutal facts. This just isn't working. Why don't you go do your own thing? And let's forget about, that incentive plan that we have. And he said, cool, shook hands. We were good. I thought we were great until February 14th when I got served saying that he was the rightful owner. I kicked him out and he was entitled to an X amount of dollars. And I was like, and at the end of the day, we settled. And the reason why my attorney said we were going to have to pay something was that stupid business card that I said that had co-owner on it.
Wow.
So, and that, end up being the start of it because I wanted to kind of show my ego got in the place and the ego started really taking over. And we were, at that time, we had 2 locations. Then I got it to 4 locations and 6 locations because I just wanted to show, like, I didn't need you. I was going to grow this business just fine without you. And that was definitely the start of it. And through those iterations, I found myself sleeping on an air mattress in Omaha, Nebraska with like store number 10, bootstrapping everything, trying to get it open, and back to no leadership team, no, just me thinking I was the smartest guy in the room. We could open all these locations. I could show that previous guy, that I didn't need him. And that's, kind of when things started falling off the wagon and the doom loop really started kicking into high gear was Omaha, Nebraska, in circa 2015 in like October. That's all very clear for me.
So that was 5 months, 5 years into the company, right?
Yep. 5 years. We were starting to open locations all across the country. We were in Des Moines. We were in Omaha. We had 6 locations here in the cities. We had letters of intent in Texas. I was about to drive to Kansas City to look at some new leases. I remember we put a poster up in the stores. By the end of 2016, we were going to have 50 locations. And I think we saw that poster a couple of months ago when we were moving. I was just like, Wow, what a time. What a time. A lot of things didn't work out. But I think maybe the final aha finally hit the rock bottom was sitting in the Idea Center. I still remember vividly up in the conference room. If anyone's been in the Idea Center, Crystal Court, they got these beautiful conference rooms up there. And it's where all the attorneys and everybody else kind of, if there's a big group gatherings, there's always catering, always an event going up in there. And I'm by myself in this conference room in the Idea Center, looking down at our store, which we had in the Skyway, and we had $70 left in the bank account. We just ran a payroll. And I'm just like, oh God, payroll's due in 2 weeks. There's no freaking way we're making payroll in 2 weeks. And that was one of the crappiest moments of my life. And and this is when I knew it finally turned around. I was so hungry. I was like, in your downtown, I couldn't afford, I was like, I can't justify going to, what was it there? I don't even know if they're open anymore. Potbelly. I was like, I couldn't justify going to Potbelly, getting my roast beef sandwich with my broccoli and cheddar soup, spending $14 when there's only $70 left. I wasn't even paying myself anything out of the business, so I had no money. So I'm like, there was catering, a Panera catering by probably one of the law firms in town. And no one was looking. I went over there, took a catering box, ate it, and I was just like, clearly this isn't working, Casey. We have to figure something out. So that might have been maybe the bottom of the doom loop.
When was that, Casey? 2020?
That was 2017.
That was 2017.
So yeah, we're not throwing it.
Oh, okay. All right.
That was rock bottom.
All right, that was rock bottom. All right.
Well, let me ask this question before you keep going. How did you make payroll 2 weeks later?
We had to make a lot of tough decisions. I sat down the team and said, we're going to have to lay off some people. We're going to have to move a lot of inventory. We figured it out. We laid off our 2 most expensive employees. We returned a load of inventory, put it, kind of played a game of the credit card. We got a vendor credit, and then we bought new stuff. So we were able to kind of pay off our credit card bill with inventory returns. Laid off employee, 2, 3, 4 people we laid off. And at that time, there's maybe 20 of us. So we laid off pretty much 20% of the staff, made payroll, fixed up some accounts receivable, some cash, some inventory. And shortly after that, it was kind of one of my first learning lessons was trust the numbers. The numbers were telling me at that time somebody was stealing, but I said, no one would steal from me. I'm a lovable CEO. I take care of all my people. Why would anybody rob from poor old Gopher Mods? And then we found out somebody was stealing 6 figures from us at that time.
Oh,
and that was, the start of, that's a problem. But I didn't want to believe it. My ego was in the way. I thought I was so special. No one would steal from me. But even though the numbers were showing somebody was, and I just said, no, it's probably my mistake. My numbers, my system is wrong. And that's where it's, no, I should have trusted the numbers.
That's crazy.
So that was 2017.
So talk about
questions?
Then. So So like keep going. So you're 2017. You kind of find a way to get through that. You bootstrap it. You figure it out. Like then talk about like other times that you feel like you're running the doom loop or what that looks like for you.
At that point, I think we started thinking. If I knew there was a doom loop at that time, I thought, great, we're getting out of it. At this point, we figured out someone embezzling $100,000. We got rid of some of our most expensive employees that, great people at the end of the day, but maybe were overpaid for what the value they were adding at that time. Again, probably my fault. I created the incentive plan. And so all of a sudden we're profitable. Things are looking good. We've closed our Omaha and Des Moines stores. Cash flow is looking good. So like, all right, things are looking on the up and up. 2020 hits. COVID. Great. At that time, we were just starting to turn the corner. I think we had our first profitable year in 7-8 years at that point. And it's like, okay, what the heck's going to happen? 2 things happened right in February 2020. We landed our largest account, and that was exciting. But then a month later, the shutdown, we're like, oh no, we just landed our largest account, our largest school account. Is this gone? Is this over? Did we just work this hard for it all just to be wiped out? So we closed some more stores, social distancing. We didn't have enough staff. We closed some more stores, which turned out to start to be maybe that first little sign of like, wait a second, we're more profitable with less stores. Why? It's all these school accounts and business accounts that are really much more efficient and exciting to work with and scalable. And at that time, rocket fuel was sprinkled. Everyone had their COVID bucks. Everybody was sitting at home with their iPhones, their iPads, their MacBooks. And, we were essential business. So all our stores, pretty much if you were a repair shop in 2020, it was champagne and cocaine. Like everybody was coming into you. It was great. Like you sold anything. Every device was repaired. There's no question asked. It was like normally tax return season's our busy time because that's when everyone's got extra cash. They fix their stuff, they buy. It was like March for all of April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. It was just booming all of 2020, which was that kind of that excitement, like, ooh, we got to open retail stores again. The going, it's good. But back to finally starting to get smart. And I think that's when I met Glen too. I'm still working way too much, thinking that was the strategy. But our school business just started picking up too. As every school was also digital learning, our school business was rocking. Our businesses were rocking. Our retail was rocking. But we finally started saying, starting to question ourselves. Like, where should we focus? Schools, businesses, or retail? And we were saying yes to everything at that time. Well, we probably should have started saying no.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. So really, you spent a lot of time in the Dupe Loop, right? Over the last 15 years, maybe periods of time where you were there for prolonged periods of time.
That might be the Doom Loop MVP of longest game. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's what that says about me or just how vicious the Doom Loop can be.
I think it's a fascinating story. Glenn, I was going to ask you a question. Like you've known Casey now personally and then as a client over the last, it sounds like 5 years, right? So what has been kind of your observation of Casey, both first as somebody you got to know and as a friend and as a client, like when you think about the Doom Loop thing?
Well, I'll tell you a story. So when I first met Casey, it was in a WeWork, a co-op workplace location, probably in late 2019, I think, maybe early 2020.
I think, I can't remember. It was like that before COVID, after COVID.
It was right around that time.
It was dark. And I wore the same outfit every day like I still do. So it's really hard to visualize those years.
Yeah. So I needed some work on my laptop. I think I'd gotten a virus on it on my Mac. And I asked at the desk and they said, oh, I think that guy, Casey's his name. I think he does something with computers. And I'm like, that kid? And Casey, you're all 30 some years old or, 32. And Casey would always come in and he had his Gopher Mods gear on. He had a baseball cap pulled low and he had his laptop up with the Gopher Mods logo on it. And I'm like, oh, this must be like some guy that he fixes computers. And that's why he's sitting here with all his logo gear. So people come to him. So like I asked him and we started talking and he started telling me about Gopher Mods. I'm like, you own a business. You run a business. Started our conversations from then. But I think the kind of couple observations by Casey. One is that, he's very intelligent.
Go on.
He's a learner. He's very coachable. But at the same point in time, I think, if you don't mind me saying about this, Casey, I think you're almost too intelligent in a sense.
Go on.
Well, Casey has this ability to really figure things out, to dig in, do the research, figure it out. Another talent he has, though, is like, there's many people who are detail-oriented and many people who can have a vision, but there's not too many people who can bring those two together. And I think Casey is one of those people who can. And that can be a really good trait for an entrepreneur who starts off a business in their dorm room and just kind of has to do everything in the business to get to grow, right?
Right, yeah.
But as I know you've seen, John, I've seen, and I think Casey has witnessed, at a point in time, what got you here won't get you there, but it can keep you here. And I think that my observation about Casey is now his realization of, wow, I can't be the answer person for everything in my company. I can't be the person that figures everything out and does everything and then just hands it back to other people and tells them what to do. And I think, that was kind of Casey's way of running the company early on that worked really well. But now to a point of where, he shared with you some of the numbers around scaling and his
Yeah.
ambition of scaling, it will work, right?
Yeah.
And there's things that he's putting into place and he's learning. And I think for me, and like many of the clients that I work with, a real rewarding part is seeing that journey for them of evolving from many times the entrepreneur, I'll do everything, I know how to do everything in this company better than anybody, to the point of like, oh, I'm now starting to build leaders within my company and empower them and coach them and lead them to do those things I used to do. And I'm leaving those jobs, and now I'm evolving into a true CEO and leader of a company.
Yeah.
And I think that's the path that Casey's on. Yeah, right?
It's such a limiting perspective, and we see it, right? I mean, I don't know if that's ego or control or this is all that I know how to do, right? And so I just do more of that, and it's just like you get to a point you're not going anywhere else. You're just you're stuck, and you can't work anymore.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
John, you and I had Barry Conchi on our podcast earlier episode, and I loved one of the things that Barry said. He said, speaking to a CEO, you left a job. Why are you still doing it?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the hallmarks of the doom loop is CEOs who, right, they were doing this thing, whether it was sales or they're running operations or technology, and then they hired someone really smart to do that job so that they could focus on being the CEO, but yet they persist in still doing that job. And what does that do? Well, it pisses off the really smart person they hired because they're limiting them by that very virtue.
Yeah. It almost shows like a trust, right?
Yes.
I think it's a trust thing. You hired me to do a job and you're coming in and telling me how to do my job, or you're doing some component of my job. And really the reality is a talent will not wait very long and then make a decision that I'm not going to be part of that organization.
Absolutely.
They're just not going to tolerate it. So yeah, it's great. It's great perspective. So I want to go back a minute. Casey, you said something a few minutes ago that has not come up in any of our podcasts yet. So I don't want to skip past that. And I think it's really important for CEOs to hear this. So you talked about you hire your best friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about what your learning is around hiring best friends. What are, as you look back on that experience, and also I'm going to go, the next question is about giving up equity, right?
Yeah.
Quickly. And what are your thoughts about both those things? So one, hiring friends, and then two, about giving equity.
Yeah, I think it goes kind of back to I wanted to work with people, that I was friends with, that I enjoyed. And I don't know if that was back to because I was scared or I didn't know any better, or again, it just seemed like the easy out. And I'm thinking about top grading scorecards. I'm like, if I would have had a scorecard and like, here's the competencies and accountabilities and the success metrics, I would have never hired them at that time. And that probably would eliminate, a lot of friends or in that decision making. And just maybe your friend is the person for that. But would you, back to it's a sports team, it's not a family business, like treating it's like we are a high functioning team. We're not a family. Can't fire family, can't feel like you can't fire friends. And, I want to hold them accountable. And well, then when you hold them accountable, it's really hard to disentangle the two and especially throw equity in there. And it's going to get uglier and messier. So I think back to like having a scorecard, think back to who, not how. It was just me making the decisions. Now we got me out of hiring a long time ago, which thank goodness, because I thought I was good at it. But clearly every dysfunctional, employee relationship was pretty much somebody I hired outside of a few, but more often than not, like I wasn't good at it. And that's when I was like, oh, what else am I not good at? Oh, I'm not good at hiring. I'm not good at finance. I thought I was good. Well, yeah, when you were the only person doing it, of course you're good. You don't know any better. I don't think, hiring friends is off the table, but probably just not the smartest thing in the world to do anymore.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So this is 12, 13 years ago, right? When you had your friend working with you as your co-owner. Do you think that you had at that point the maturity as a business owner, CEO, to create a scorecard for him back then? Would that have been something you've been open to, or are you now open to that after realizing kind of some of the struggles and failures that you've been through as a CEO? And now you're like, gosh, like this is creating clarity of expectation is essential. Can you talk about that evolution a little bit?
Yeah, it's as much as, I look back like, yeah, it was the most expensive business card ever, but I also think, was that just part of the CEO journey? Like you had to go through it.
Hmm.
If it was so easy, I think what Daniel Kahneman and all the psychologists kind of go through it, the best athletes, the best CEOs, they all had some adversity in their life. They don't have it easy. You have to figure it out. So I look back and it's like, yeah, at the earlier days, I was mad, I was sad. But now if I look back, I'm like, I'm thankful because if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't be here today. Maybe could have got here sooner if I was, more mature. I was 21, 22 years old at the time, and
Yeah.
I've never had a job in my life. I didn't know better. Did I know who Jim Collins was? And at that time, absolutely. Was I trying to create a BHAG and a flywheel when at that age? Yeah. But I don't think I was emotionally or mentally mature just to kind of really be doing that at that age. So, but I am thankful for, being served and going through that long, painful journey. I just hope next time if I ever get in that doom loop, I don't let it take that long to get out of it. But I think all the learnings there were, invaluable.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you know when you're going into the doom loop now?
Whoa. I don't know. Do we ever know when the smarter we get, the more who's we get around that can hold you accountable, trust that your team is going to have a productive conflict about the commitments and the accountability to our results of our 3-year and our BHAG. At the end of the day, if once it all comes together, I feel like that should shrink your feedback loop to you're about to get in the doom loop, Casey or team. So if you have a fully functional team, I feel like you're probably not going to, if you do get in it, you're going to get out of it really fast now.
Okay.
Yeah. John, would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I would agree that I think the quality of your leadership team, and we talked to Barry about this the other day. I think the quality of your leadership team, I think it helps you to stay out of the doom loop longer. I do think though that, being a CEO, and we were talking about this the other day too, is we are human beings. So even if we're super excited and we're super engaged in what we do, I think there's days though, for any one of us, it could be you be the president of the United States. Like, I just think that there's days that you're not at the same level, right? I think it's hard to be there all the time. And so I think it's can be in the doom loop for a lot of different reasons, right? I think that personal things can affect us and we bring those to work, right? I think those are big drivers, or we can start to manifest stuff ourselves in our head about, what if this happens or that happens? And so, we create this worry that I think gets us in the doom loop even before those things have occurred. So I think that, I think great teams help to minimize the doom loop. I think they help to hold you accountable to, hey, how are you showing up? Is this the way you want to show up today? And you have to be okay with that as a CEO, that your team can call you and say, hey, is that really the way that you want to lead? Is that really the way you want to show up today? I think that's really helpful. But I do think that even still, I think it's hard as a CEO to not be there, or not on the edge of it, or not get in the middle of it. I do.
Yeah. I like what you said, John, about being in your own head, because I think I really see that, and I recognize it myself as a CEO formerly versus having a strong team. And as Casey, when you have a strong team, because we all have our ups and downs and days, right? And there's personal issues and emotional, yet having the strength of a team where a CEO doesn't always have to be in their own head. They're not trying to do 16 jobs and think about 300 different things. Because that was always the image I had of myself when I was a CEO. Anytime I was talking to someone, I felt like there was a tornado in my head with 1,000 things swirling. I'm like, okay, I'm talking to this person right now, but over here something's going wrong, and over here I gotta call this person. Versus having team members, and even now with the team I have that's relatively small, understanding nope, this person's got that. Nope, this person's got that. And having times when I am kind of feeling like, wow, is this thing right? To have a team I can share that with and trusted people on my team that can say, hey, why don't you let me do this for you? Because you're clearly stuck. This happened just the other day, actually, in our weekly huddle. Someone on our team pointed out, hey, Glenn, I'm like, I'm sucking at this thing. I'm not getting it done. And they said, well, why did you take it on? You shouldn't be doing this. How about this person? And they said, yeah, I'll take that on because it really should be mine.
Yeah. I think great teams help. I think the essential part of all that, and I think we see this in our work, and Glenn, you're able to go there, is the ability to be vulnerable as a leader, right? And I think this is impossible to allow our team members to hold us accountable or help pull us out and say, hey, are you okay? Like, are you really doing that? If we can't be vulnerable with them, right? And so we have to be able to lead people, show them the way, but even then we have to be able to say, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not having my best day, or, some things are affecting me. People will be there for you if you could be, vulnerable and transparent with them, I think they'll be there for you. But, I think we see this where there's CEOs that can't go there, right? For whatever the reason is. And then they don't create that psychological safety ease or that it's okay to come in and have these kind of, human conversations that I think we all require. So I think vulnerability is a real important part of that.
I think Mr. Lencioni is reaching out from some of these books behind us and interjecting himself in the conversation.
Yeah.
Half back there somewhere.
Yeah, look at that perspective. Casey, would you like to, I think that's a really good topic that I know you've experienced some personal growth on and insight into over your journey.
Which one? I've grown and failed in a lot of areas. So you're going to have to be more.
Well, the idea of being vulnerable as a leader and engaging in healthy conflict and then empowering people in your organization versus being the one that's always got to do it all.
Yeah, I think it almost goes back to I was really good at it in the beginning, 15 years being vulnerable to the original business partner. And then I think I touched it and I got burned. So I stopped being vulnerable for the longest time, just rolling up the sleeves, sleeping on the air mattresses. I always just thought, they see me doing it. And I thought it was a respect thing. But then in hindsight, recognizing, it was a problem, trust, just again, my ego thinking no one could do it as well as me, which was clearly wrong. But once the vulnerable moments, hey, I had to come to a bunch of people on the team and say, we got $70 left in the bank account. We got to figure this out. And now just, being comfortable, being honest with myself, with my life partner, and with business partners and colleagues, it's been a lot easier when you start thinking about vulnerability, empathy, and leading with empathy, trying to put yourself in your shoes and being comfortable, being able to say, I don't know. And that took me a long time to be comfortable to say, I don't know, because I thought that was weakness. And that's not what it meant to be a man, our masculinity or anything along those lines, but being vulnerable and having those honest conversations about myself. That took a long time. Still working on it to this day. But, hopefully someone will smack me upside the head if I fall down into that loop again. Watch it. I'm sorry about to smack me over there.
Yeah, he's going. He's raising his hand. Yeah, it's great. It's great perspective. So let me ask you this question as a follow-up to that. So as you think about kind of that willingness to be vulnerable, was there a moment that when you started to realize that this thing's getting too big for just you and you needed to make some changes? What did that look like for you?
It was probably back in 2017. I remember pretty much breaking down in front of the entire management team saying, you guys can have the business. I'll sell it to you for next to nothing. And I don't remember exactly what I said. We were in the conference room in the IDS center. And I said, you guys can have it. I can't do this. I'm out. I'm burnt out. I'm cooked. And they all told me no, and at that time, which was really nice for them to kind of if I wouldn't have done that, curious of what would have happened. We probably would have went out of business where they reinvigorated me. They felt like, no, Casey, we got you. Don't worry about it. At that point, I don't think I took a vacation day in 5 years. I probably worked every single day for 5 years straight. And I just didn't recognize that mental toll that it had on me at that time, or even probably my relationship with my friends, my family, let alone work. And just finally, I would say hitting rock bottom and I think I took a vacation finally. And, just being able to just come to the team at that time. Now I don't feel like it's that uncomfortable to be that vulnerable with the team because it goes back to the 5 dysfunctions. Trust. I
Yeah.
trust them. It's a smart trust, not a blind trust anymore. So that's big evolution. So the 2017 was, I think, the very first time I was really vulnerable with the team. And I probably was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Let's try that again. Let's not hide it and try it again. Act like you're tough and that you can solve all the problems.
Yeah. That's a crazy story. So you're just at a point like, I'm done. I can't do it again. I kind of talk about it as like you're on a boat and you're in shark infested waters and you just kind of walk off the plank and like, I can't do it anymore. I've been there. He's just like, this is too much. I can't do this anymore. And it was one of the reasons that my coach was so impactful for me. But that's really what you're describing and then the team really rallied around you in that moment, right? And said, no, we got your back. What does that team look like today? Are those people that were with you in 2017, are they still with you today?
Well,
As you continue
fun
the journey?
fact, the person that was embezzling from us was in that room at that time. So he maybe, that was wild to think that he was like, oh, great, I get everything I'm stealing. Oh, wait, maybe he saw a problem there. In that room, there is only one person left that was in that room at that time.
Wow. So how do you feel about that?
What do you mean, that there's still one, or that the turnover?
Yeah. So really, for me, these are emotional, deep decisions, right? So those people were with you at 17, hit rock bottom, and even the guy that stole money from you was there, maybe realized that he's going to lose his gravy train, so he had to support you. I don't know, but you had these people for whatever reason said, hey, we're not going to let you go out of business. We'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And you were grateful, I'm sure, to them that they're 2 weeks later you made payroll and you started to have a different trajectory.
Yeah.
And so you went from this point of really being at the bottom of the blue to slowly working your way out of it. And today, only one of those people's with you. That's a hard journey, right? That's a difficult journey. So just talk about kind of like the people side of that. How did that feel for as you went from where you're at 17 and those people that were there rallying together with you to where you're at today, and only one of those people's there today, which is pretty typical what we see a lot.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to what I think Glen said earlier, what got you here won't get you there. And that's right, people, but that's hard as a CEO, right? So can you talk about that a bit? Like what's that kind of emotional connection to those people that aren't with you anymore?
Yeah, for the people that aren't with, it was hard conversations, just the dread. I don't want to have this conversation. I don't want to do this, get me away from, I feel like CEOs, we love avoiding conflict. I mean, I feel like that's why I started my businesses. Like, I didn't want to work for somebody. I didn't want somebody to tell me what to do or what I can't do. Screw that. And so I hate conflict. And so that was like, oh, wait, I have to tell these people that I appreciate you being there for me now, then, but you're no longer you're not going to be on the bus anymore. How do I get them off the bus? It was really tough. But I think at the end of the day, I waited too long to make those decisions. I was hurting them, not me. And they are now all doing fabulous, actually, in other parts of their careers where Gopher Mods probably wasn't the right company for them.
Yeah. That's good.
They may have been here for the wrong reasons, or maybe they thought they were doing the right thing. I thought I was doing the right thing, but we're all doing it for probably the wrong reasons. So in total, in 2017, I think there's 3 employees left. Only one of them was in that room. But now all 3 of those that were still at Gopher Mods in 2017 are now on the leadership team and now all in the room today when we're making these making these decisions. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I think I wish I would have done it sooner. I didn't need to wait that long. Didn't need to torture myself. Didn't need to torture the company, clients, employees, friends, family. I tortured way too many people. Because why? Because I was afraid.
Afraid to make
That's
the right
pretty
decision.
typical. Yeah, your
typical.
perspective there is unique, and I haven't heard that before. Glenn, I want to ask you this. Like Casey said that he started his own business because he didn't like conflict, and he didn't want to work for somebody who was going to say, "Hey, go do this," whatever that is, or "Hey, why don't you need to work Saturday," and that would create conflict. So he decided he's going to whole business evolve out of his dorm room. But one of the reasons that he wanted to do that is because he don't want to answer to somebody which should create that conflict. Right. So really interesting. I never thought about that before. So Glenn, have you found that? Do you see that with other CEOs? Like they're probably in that CEO seat or the business owner seat because they want to avoid that conflict, and that was a mechanism for them to do that?
I think so. I think that's great that Casey brought up. That is a unique point. I hadn't thought of it that way before.
Yeah, me either.
Right. What I have definitely seen though is people who have started their own business wanting to go on their own because they didn't want to put up with the corporate BS or the politics, which is probably, it's kind of some code words for having to work with people and through the conflicts and get things done through people, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, no, I'm going to go do this on my own. Well, then they start doing things well. It's like, oh, I'm gonna invite some other people into my business. And I bet many times, and Casey, I'd be curious to hear this from you, is like the mindset is like, well, this is my own business, so I'm going to set the way it's going to be done. And everybody will just, follow along with that. And what I do know, John, I remember from our CEO playbook interviews and in my experiences with my CEOs is they're like, oh, I just hate dealing with people. Oh, the people side of it. And the truth of the matter, John, I know you and I tell people this, is like, you're no longer in the device repair business or the construction business or the manufacturing widgets business. You are in the people business.
Yeah.
And most CEOs and business leaders don't want to acknowledge that. They got to where they are because of their technical knowledge and expertise. But at a point when they need to start then building a team to do the work, get work done through them, that's when it transforms into a people business.
Yeah. That's great perspective. So you were going to ask Casey something about that?
Casey, your perspective.
Oh, about what you just said there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree 100%. That's, I think, another great way to reframe it. Just love being an entrepreneur. I love making my own decisions, and it's kind of like getting out of that solopreneur mindset and putting on the CEO mindset. That's hard. That's been my biggest challenge, is like recognizing it's not just you anymore, Casey. You can't unilaterally make these decisions. You should be the last one to speak on these topics. You should be open-minded to other thoughts, opinions, viewpoints, and you might be wrong. And I think I acted like a solopreneur with 30, 40 employees for the longest time. And that's why, it was really hard to get out of that doom loop where I just needed to hit pause, reflect what other people thought, get other varying opinions and inputs. But at the time I was like, oh man, I love being an entrepreneur. I would never want to work for anybody. But at the end of the day, I do. I have 32 bosses, 33 bosses, in the sense of my employees, my customers, my clients. It's like, I should be listening to them, but still making sure I'm guiding the ship towards our visions, our goals, our action items, and holding them accountable.
Yeah.
But I just love being an entrepreneur. I would never want to do anything else in my life.
I was going to ask you, do you think you're unemployable?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I'm unemployable. No doubt about that.
How about you, John?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How about you, Glen?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think
so. What is the reason that we all say that? What's the reason that we think we're unemployable anymore?
Oh, I'll give my answer.
Does it go back to the BS? We don't want to deal with the BS and the corporate hierarchy and all that. What is it?
I'll go back, John, to 7 years ago after I exited my second company. And I remember thinking like, I just want to get a job. And I want to work with a team, but I don't want to have all that responsibility. I don't want to be carrying all this weight on my shoulders. And I was interviewing with this management consulting firm, and I was being interviewed, like my last interview, I had to just, go talk with the CEO one afternoon, and everybody said, the VP of HR was like, Glen, you're shoo-in, you're in. And she said, just don't crap on the table when you're talking to the CEO. And she said, the offer will be in your inbox tomorrow morning. Like, you're in. Just don't crap on the table. And guess what?
He crapped on the table.
True story. And at the end, I talked to the CEO for 2 hours, had a great conversation. At the end, he said, Glen, I really like you. I like you a lot. You're a good guy. And because of that, I'm going to tell you this to your face. Normally I texted to you on the way home. I'm going to tell you to your face. I'm not going to hire you. And I was like, what? I go, I was thinking, my wife bought a new dress. We're going to go out and celebrate tonight. And he said, Glen, you're a CEO. you don't want to work for me. You don't want to work for anybody. He goes, you'll come here, you'll do great work. He goes, but after 12 to 18 months, you'll get restless and because you're just going to go want to do your own thing and run your own thing.
Yeah.
And you know what? He was right.
Yeah.
And he goes, you should be a CEO coach. He goes, I have one. I pay him a lot of money. I'd hire you on the spot, but I already have one. He goes, but I'll introduce you, and I think you should do this. And he had a scaling up coach who I met, and that's how I chose to do this over 7 years ago.
That's phenomenal. That's a great story. That's a great turn, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's unbelievable that he had that level of transparency with you.
I would agree.
Yeah, that you could change. So
Yeah. So thanks, Matt, wherever you are.
yeah, thanks, Matt. So cool. Casey, at some point, you decided, and this has been last year, obviously, that you needed some outside support. So when you started to think about outside support in the form of coaching, what were you looking for when you started? Did you go do a search? Did you just kind of know Glenn and felt comfortable with him? Or what did that look like for you to get to one, to make a decision that you needed some outside help or perspective, and two, how'd you end up with Glenn?
Got it. Well, back to that ego thing, John. For the longest time, I didn't think I needed a coach.
This is true.
But I mean, how many events did I go to? I was at Jim Collins twice, Costa Rica a bunch, Canada. I just kept hanging around all these people doing this coaching thing with these fancy charts and BHAGs and 3HAGs and visions. To whereas, all right, I just recognize I did the working genius, and what was my wonderment and enablement or innovation?
Yeah.
Basically the ones where galvanizing and just love sharing the vision, not my strengths. I just love to build and think, but to actually rally the troops around a uniform vision, jump on the
Yeah.
bus, we're going there together. We're gonna get on 35W and we're gonna go south to DFW or something. I lacked that ability, and it just took, again, a stubbornly long time for me to recognize that, in my personality, if I say it once or think it once, I just feel like everybody else gets it. And it took me a long time. Like, no, dumbass, you got to actually repeat yourself a lot. You got to have a vision that people can jump on board and want to, yes, I want to sign up for this tour of duty. I want to do this with you, with this company. And it just took a painfully long time to recognize you kind of need a vision, a coach, something that I could draw on a whiteboard a million times and get excited every time I draw it, and other people get excited to like, yes, I want to go there too. I want, that's the journey I want to join and do with you. And so it just took a long time. I think it was ultimately where Jim Collins, not this year, last year, had two members of the leadership team. I was finally not being cheap. Like, all right, I'll pay for you guys to come down to Chicago. They were the ones that sold me on it. And it goes back to that, I think, being a reflection of like, they were right the whole time. Like, I needed to get some other people in my ear of like, Casey, I want to do this. Instead of me telling people, hey, I went to this awesome Jim Collins thing. We're going to go hire a business coach now. We're going to do this thing called Metronomics. We're going to do all this. It really came from, the team of like, we want to do this. And I was like, really? You guys want to do this? And they had their visions and their dreams and their goals were bigger than mine. I'm like, oh, were you guys holding back on me for this whole entire time? Or was I just not listening? So it was Jim Collins in 2024 when it was kind of like, all right, well, let's have a conversation with Glen. Let's make sure we all are bought in on this. We all weighed in. This, is an investment into kind of processes and systems and could be ruthlessly challenging for all of us. And Glenn said, the leadership teams usually turn over. Not everybody makes it through the end.
Yeah.
Then I was like, and that was kind of tough for me to hear. And I wanted them to hear that. And they all nodded their head like, let's do this. And that was April this year when we sat in this very room and started charting out the next 25 years.
Wow.
John, do you talk with your teams about that and your CEOs when you start working together about how this process is going to, we demand accountability and there's going to be a transparency there, and some people may not choose to be on the journey?
I think it depends. Like, I have a variety of different kinds of clients and CEOs, and Some, yeah, for sure. And then others, we kind of fold it in over time as we start to see how people actually play the game or do the work. In fact, for some people that, some of those concepts are just so, I don't know, abrasive or hard to hear that lead with that. I think it becomes apparent through the work that they're not the right people to be in the room, though, for sure.
Yeah, definitely so. I
Yeah.
had earlier in my career, I remember I worked with a CEO, and I really wanted to work with this guy. He's just really smart, really eager. But I still remember he had a lot of family members that worked in the company, and he said, one thing, I'm not going to let anyone go. I can't. This is my family. Can't let anybody go. And of course, some of the lowest performers, I shouldn't say lowest performers, but there were definitely some people, and some of them even knew it, that they weren't A players and they weren't the best people to be sitting in those seats.
Yeah.
And that engagement didn't last very long. And that was, I think one of the reasons now I look back and I think that's someone I should not have taken on as a client, because they weren't willing to do the difficult, admittedly very difficult work, to do the things they needed to do to truly grow the company.
Yeah. They got to be willing to evolve the hard people decisions. And again, I do find that's different. I do find that I get everybody to that point where they realize that and they're ready to make those hard decisions. It's just, there's that change time frame that these are new radical, concepts for everybody. And some people can glom onto it quicker than others. So that's what I see. So Casey, why Glen? Why'd you choose Glen as your coach?
I think a lot of it goes back to vulnerability. Glenn had both of us had a lot of conversations about vulnerability with one another, which I think establishes trust. Just kind of thinking even right back to Patrick Lencioni of trust. I trusted him. We had a lot of, challenging, productive conflict conversations to where he just wasn't telling me what I wanted to hear. He was giving me the brutal facts. Commitments. He seemed committed to not only to Gopher Mods' success. He wants us to succeed. He didn't want us to just, back to saying no. I know he said no to probably a lot of clients. So it's back to he's just not saying yes to everybody that's nearby to coach. Accountability. I feel like, we are friends, but, we can hold each other accountable. I think he'll have a higher likelihood of holding me accountable, and he's had no problem doing that. And then in addition to that, it's results. Previous CEO, this war stories that he's told, I just feel like combining all those, it kind of made it a no-brainer. And the team, that was through me, then asking those same questions about, the leadership team. Do you guys trust Glenn? Do you guys feel comfortable with Glenn? Just kind of, it was just green checks all across. So we're like, all right, let's do it.
Awesome. That's good stuff. So what's been the hardest part of the coaching process for you?
Ooh, maybe Glenn didn't, give us, and this is not Glenn's fault, but moreover, I don't think he understood, we're a bunch of C and S personalities where you tell us to do something, we go do.
Yeah.
We're like, yes, sir, let's go. Well, we just ripped the Band-Aid off just really fast. And I think he was a little shocked how quickly we just jumped right in. So where maybe he could have these things are going to happen. You're going to piss off a lot of employees. You're going to have angry, this, that. It was just a fire hose of oh my God, what did we do? Are we doing the right thing? Yep. Stay the course, baby. Don't hold back. Let's go. We're all in. So I think maybe, a little softening around that. If you guys go for it, it's going to sting a little bit. And, but that's not really his fault. So that's been a challenge of maybe wow, everything he did say, did happen. Your employees are going to say this, the culture is changing. You guys are getting corporate. All those things started happening. Our Indeed reviews went to crap because we got a lot of C players out of the business real fast. And a lot of our current staff was what is happening? It was a good reflection of the old Gopher Mods is gone. What you signed up for and what you originally joined for, that's not what we're doing anymore. This is the vision. This is the direction. If you want to be on this bus, here's your scorecard. If not, we understand this isn't what you signed up for. So just kind of recognizing that we went real fast, all in, and we're 6 months in, and now it's starting to feel real good. Where I was walking around the office, I was scared. I'd walk around a corner and be peek around, I was like, who did I piss off today? So that was just more of that I think that's with any change. Change is difficult.
Yeah. What Casey is talking about is really good. Sorry, John. Now clarify a little bit, maybe even see if you've seen this. So many of the clients I work with, we work with, right, John, and the coaching, because one of the core, there's strategy, there's execution, but there's really the soft side of the business, which is the people, right?
Yeah.
You can have a great strategy, but it's tough to come up with without the right people in the room. You can be good at executing, but that's also tough without having the right people. But ultimately, to make everything come together, you have to have the right people. And the whole idea of implementing scorecards of the organization and then starting to say, okay, who are A players, who are B players, and who are those C players, right?
Yeah.
And having some rigor and process around that. I've worked with some teams, it's taken them years
Yeah.
to really embrace it and implement it,
Yeah.
put into practice and work through their team. And Casey and his team went at it like nobody else I've ever worked with before. And I was
Okay.
frankly pleasantly surprised. And I think that's what Casey's talking about, is that thinking about, I don't know for you, John, if you see this, but to say, something that some companies would take years to do, they've compressed it into a pretty short time period. And that was the phrase about ripping the bandage off. I think, Casey, I'd love to ask you this, having done that, how are you feeling now here 6 years later, or 6 months later, 6 months later?
A lot better. Up and, think about the growth of up and to the right of culture. We have we're a younger team here. So, vibes are a thing. So I'd say the vibes in the office are really good. So we're no longer in a vibe session. Like, everybody's happy. People know that there's other 8 players around them. We're all here because we want to be here. So I would say the overall energy in the office, the shop, the morale is that, from where it was in April to the summer lulls to now where we're at, it's been incredibly good.
Yeah, it's interesting. Glenn, building on your point, I'm lucky enough to work with some companies that are over 100 years old.
Yeah.
And when we talk about a scorecard concept, they've never even contemplated or aware what a scorecard really was. And he introduced this
Right.
concept to them, which is really a tool for creating clarity about expectation, which is one of the most important things to get right to create a highly engaged workforce.
Mhm.
And then the ability to hold the people accountable. Well, the struggle
Right.
with that, they have a sense, this is some of what you're talking about, Casey, is as you start to put that in place, quite honestly, there's a lot of people in every business across the world, but in the United States and North America, that people would just like to get a paycheck without being accountable to any specific performance standards or culture of that.
Yeah.
Every organization is made up of those people. So then when you start to put a scorecard in and says, okay, what are you really accountable for, responsible for? What do you have to get done every day? If that's move 3 piles of dirt from, this side of the building, that side of the building, or it's to sell $1 million revenue, whatever it is, and you put
Mhm.
that in writing and you now start to manage performance against that, it's a game-changing thing. And a lot of people just haven't been through that process. The commitment from the CEO, Casey, it's important that you were committed to that. There is turmoil around that. But your A players want it, right? Your A players want to be accountable. They want to know what performance looks like. And the reality is the C players don't. They just want to get a paycheck and they want you to be accountable for making payroll. They don't really want to be accountable for doing anything to make payroll. They want you as the CEO to be accountable, and that is the problem. And so when we start to put this stuff in working with our clients, and we do it early, it does create some struggle, I would say, and consternation in the organization, but it's about getting the right team in place.
Casey, does any of your recent experience from what John said about, C players versus A players and those kinds of expectations, and does that sound familiar?
100%. It was kind of that talking both sides of their mouth, like, oh, we want all these things. Okay, here we go. But now we're going to hold you accountable. Whoa, 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 whoa. What do you mean we have to do X per day? Well, you want Y, you got to do X. No. That's not how it works.
That's not fair.
That's not fair. Even though we all sat in the room together, you created the scorecards, decided the competencies, the accountabilities, the success metrics. You came up with that number, but now it's not fair. That was a lot of fun, and that was that way in to buy in, and in the old way of us just coming down, like, here's everything, do it. And there was no way in, there was no buy-in, there was no commitment. And so starting from the ground up with the scorecards. And I remember on a bike ride with Glen, it's just like dumping everything on him, and we were biking really fast and probably zone 4 on my heart rate. But like, wait, we're not even going that fast. I'm like zone 4 because I'm just yapping a mile a minute. And I'm like, are you sure this stuff works, Glenn? I don't think this stuff works, because here, I think that was like May or June. And then here we are, November, and it's like, oh, okay, it works. It works. Just give it time. Give it time.
Yeah. I mean, it's our clients. I would never hire another employee without a scorecard. Like you should never hire anybody. And here's the reality. You think about this. So you hire somebody without a scorecard, you hire them from a job description, and then they come start the job, and then you give them the scorecard, and then they're like, well, this isn't what I thought I was supposed to get done, or
This
I
isn't
didn't
what
know
I signed
these
up
were
for.
I didn't know
Yeah.
these were going to be the expectations. It's like so irresponsible from a leadership perspective to not get that in front of people and say, okay, here's exactly what you're accountable for in the role. So if it's to produce 1,000 widgets a day or whatever, like that's what success looks like in the role. Let's just weed people out really early in our recruiting and hiring process around using the scorecard as a tool so people really understand what are we looking for? What does performance look like in our organization for this role? And it's different for every role in every company, but like there's a lot of companies out there that, they still don't use the scorecard as their hiring process, and I wouldn't hire anybody without a scorecard, I believe, which is completely different than a job description.
Oh yeah. Job description is a process. It's like, you'll do these things, which in essence is, then we're taking on ourselves the accountability, right? We create the accountability like, hey, you just told me to do these things. You didn't tell me that I had to sign up to achieve these results.
Yeah.
And a scorecard turns that around. And it's no different than, how many people sit and watch a football game on any given Sunday in the fall, and they look at the scoreboard and they see the players and look at their stats, and right, everybody anywhere can tell exactly how any player is doing at a given point in time and how that impacts the team results.
Yeah.
Yet when we transfer that to business, it's not fair. Except anytime soon for A players, like they thrive and they're like, hey, I'm here because I want to be the best. And if I'm going to do the best, then I want to be compensated the best. And that's where having the rewards tied to performance with the proper expectations, and the expectations, as you pointed out, that's up to leadership. Like first and foremost, you have to set out those expectations and then have a mutual conversation where this person understands the expectations. They say, yep, I can do that. And most A players will say, oh, I can do that. I'm going to do better than that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's essential. It's funny when I get the chance to speak, one of the things I talk about is that if your leader is not creating a scorecard for you or being very clear about what expectations are, what you're accountable for, you should go ask them. You should create your own scorecard and go say, hey, are these the things that when I go home at night, you're just saying, these are the things that I'm paying you to do. So, because there's just a lot of bad leadership out there and isn't creating clarity of expectations. So I go home at night and I think I'm doing a good job. And my leader may think I'm doing a horrible job, but I don't know that because they haven't done their job. Well, then I have to manage up and I have to provide my leader some framework of, is this what I should be doing in my job or not?
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Yeah. All right. So before we get to our closing question, is there anything else that we should be asking Casey that we haven't yet?
Well, we got through a lot of my problems here, boys. I don't know if there's anything else to be sharing out here.
We got the virtual couch out for you.
Let me talk to me about Casey. If you don't mind sharing, we've been working together now since April, and you and your team have been working through the metronomics process very, very well. What do you see? What are the gains that you feel you've seen as CEO and within Gopher Mods in that time?
It's easier to know what to say no to. And I feel like before it was hard to say no. Now it's just, we look up on the whiteboard and we say, well, do these actions align with our vision? If yes, we should do it. If no, no. And I feel like that's just been a lot. I've said that so many times now, and every quarterly one-on-one now with the entire team where we're going over the 1 hag, the 3 hag, the B hag, and all, the swim lanes. We're going through it. And it's like, we removed that off the wall, or we're not doing that, or we changed it because the actions need to align with the vision, and myself included. If I'm not actively helping us reach that, I shouldn't be doing it. And back to the old Casey days of, rolling up the sleeves or doing something else that, called me out on it, or it's easier to call myself out on it now because those 7 magic words actions need to align with the vision. And it's just so much easier now to where if a school were to come to us and be like, hey, do you guys sell playgrounds? Before we might have said yes. But well, is it technology related to playgrounds? Or same thing with the business. Now it's no, not yet.
Yeah.
no or yes. I just feel like it's a lot more clear and easier. And then also for the team, that just that messaging filters down quicker, easier, and cleaner. I'm like, why are you working on that? Is that going to help us reach this? And we always made this really complicated, oh, if we do this and then this and then it comes back to our vision. It's like, if I have to make all those reasons or connections, those 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon to figure out that leads to our BHAG, we probably shouldn't be doing it unless it's a 1-to-1. Yeah, this is pretty clear. We should be or shouldn't.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're doing. It's great to hear you talk about that. Like you're a purpose-driven leader, connected to where are we going as an organization, driving your decision making off of that. So that's awesome that you're thinking about that way. It's essential. Good stuff. All right. So our last question is, if you're writing the CEO playbook, the next iteration of CEO playbook, what are the 3 principles that you would tell other CEOs that they should master?
Think in the long duration of being in the doom loop, still not an expert, but reflecting back on all the things that may have helped me get out of it sooner. I remember reading the book by Stephen Covey, or is it Covey? Is it Covey or
I
Covey?
think it's Covey. I think I heard that.
I've heard both now, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Say the book Smart Trust by Steve, first name basis. And I think back to like one of those earlier mistakes I made, whether with co-owner or embezzlement or numbers, or just that smart versus blind trust of how do we know it to be true? And so often or not, like it would be leader top down CEO driven. Like, is this ego talking? Is this numbers talking? Is this facts, emotions? How do we know it to be true? Call me out on it. Call each other out. Have that trust. So probably a combination of Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunction, work on that trust and work on that smart trust, not that blind trust, and those trust deposits that we need to have with our team, our clients, our customers, you name it, and just be mindful of all the withdrawals you're making and deposits you're making into that as well.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah.
2, this goes back to my being a high S personality on, the DISC analysis of sometimes I just hate repeating myself. It's where I said it once. How many times do I need to say it? Oh, yeah, silly. You need to say it a lot. And if it's important, it bears repeating. And this just happened last week. We made some more changes. I didn't follow up with somebody. I followed up with everybody else except one person. And it was like, Casey, this was a pretty big moment in their life. You probably should have talked about it more than once. You should have checked in with them probably, at the end of the week, and then start of the week again, and just ask clarifying questions, check for understanding. Just understand, like, if it's important, it bears repeating, whether that's the vision, the values, the mission, you name it. And too often, I know as a CEO, I always got caught up and they're like, how many times I got to say this? And I didn't mean it in like a jerkish way, but just moreover, like, oh, again, you probably got to repeat it, Casey. If this is the direction of the company, just because you said it once, you got to say it again and again and again and again until, as Glen would say, until you're sick of talking about it.
Yeah. I would say, yeah. And then when can I not do it? When it echoes back at you.
Exactly.
And it's right.
Yep.
Like your team starts telling you what the vision is, what the values are, what the strategy is, and they're right. That's when you've done your job.
Yeah.
That's it. When I hear it back. And I'm starting to hear it back now too, the 3 the vision, and it's getting fun where it's like, yes, and I tell everybody now, eventually, once we've done this right, you're going to be able to grab the marker on the whiteboard and you're going to be able to write exactly where we're going, how we're getting there, and who we're doing it with. And that's going to be exciting when eventually that's going to happen. Like, here's the marker. And I know they'll be more glad to do it. And that did happen a couple of weeks ago with some staff working on a Saturday. So that was pretty exciting. But I already know we're in overtime here, so we don't need to talk about that. But wearing multiple hats would probably be my 3rd one, back to my ego and our functional accountabilities. Right now, my name is written down to way too many things. And I always wore, multiple hats as a badge of honor. I work all these hours. I'm a hard ass. I get it done. But no, that was just my ego masquerading as strategy. And that was, probably the big thing of wearing multiple hats isn't as cool as it seems. And that just took me a long time to recognize that. And if I'd go back in the CEO time machine, I would say, the faster you get to one hat, the better.
The CEO
That's
time
awesome.
Boom! There we go.
I love that.
You guys can have it.
All right, we
I
can
Love
have
the
that
that.
CEO
too.
time machine. We're going to put that as part of the CEO, Escape the CEO Doom Loop. Awesome. Good stuff. I love those. Those are great. Anything else we need to talk about before we wrap?
I think that was good. I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Casey, I really want to thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
for being a client, you and your team, all of Gopher Mods. Really, I haven't met everyone yet. I look forward to that day. But I do appreciate you coming and having this chat and being so vulnerable with John and I.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Casey, thanks for making the time to talk about your journey. It's a really interesting journey. And it's actually, for me, I love this, but there's a couple things I kind of learned as you were talking, that things that we probably need to be aware of as coaches and as business leaders. So good stuff. I love these, every one of these that we do. I learned something different.
Yeah.
And there's just different insights from different people that hopefully other CEOs listen to this and it helps kind of shape their future. So thank you for joining us. To our listeners, if you'd love to learn more about Gopher Mods, their website is www.gophermods.com. Is that right, Casey?
That is correct.
All right.
Gopher Mods is GOPHERMODS.com. The work they do, check that website out. If you're a business leader and you're interested in learning more about escaping the CEO doom loop and how Glen and I can help you navigate your business to grow your business more effectively and get off the treadmill, reach out
Get rid
to
of
us.
some hats.
Get rid of some hats.
Exactly.
And please subscribe. If you liked our content today, please subscribe to our podcast. Thank you.